In the 227th Block Talks, we speak with Tony Drummond, founder of Tokenomics.net, who explains what it takes to be a solopreneur in Web3. I'm your host, Mauricio Magaldi, and this is Block Drops, your weekly digest on blockchain for business. These news are not a form of endorsement, sponsorship, or encouragement for consumption, and are meant for educational purposes only. All right, everybody, I'm here with Tony Drummond, who's going to tell us who he is and what he does with blockchain. Tony, finally, welcome to Block Talks.
Hello, Mauricio. Thank you for having me, sir. It's a pleasure to finally connect with you.
You and I have been, trading chops, if you will, on LinkedIn since the time where LinkedIn was a good platform to do that. I think we all appreciate how the curve has fallen on LinkedIn. But so it's good to connect in a podcast format. So we'll kick it off. So bring us to the beginning. What's the superhero origin story of Tony Drummond?
Well, first of all, I've been in the space since 2017, and right now I run Tokenomics.net. It's really myself, and I got one team member, and we're passionate about helping projects with all things tokenomics. We have what's called a data room, where they come to us, we get everything all put together in one productized offer. They have everything for legal, marketing, development, finance. It really tries and helps set them up for success. That's our goal. And that's kind of what I would call kind of our, primarily what I'm working on each and every day is refining that. And that's what we do as a company. And myself, I've always been kind of a builder mindset. I've always been a bit of a polymath. I'm one to read a wide variety of books and a wide variety of subjects. And so this space fits me very well, because I'm fortunate to work with people in such a wide variety of niches and industries. One might be manufacturing and like cocoa processing. Another one might be some like payment processing thing, right? So it's pretty cool how I could take these, both these different worlds, but we'll get more into that as time goes on. But that's who I am, and that's what I'm passionate about doing each and every day right now.
How did crypto cross your life? Because if you started in 2017, there's a pre-crypto life that you lived. So tell us a little bit more. What was that life like and how crypto came into that?
Yeah, I mean, I've always just been kind of like, I want to say old school hacker type guy, like someone who liked to explore stuff. And I first became aware of it, I want to say even before that point, where I was once going to set up my own Bitcoin miner, but then I got lazy. And I said, it's probably not worth it. Right. So I stopped doing that. And then I don't know what year that was, but then I remember I was living in like a house with like 5 other dudes at the time. So I was probably my early 20s, at the time, but anyway, or so maybe a little bit after that. But, then I got more into it 2017. It came across and I just heard some friends talking about it. I became interested in it. And then once I got in there, I got kind of hooked. And then I was kind of in the December point of 2017, which is not the best. That was when I was saying Tron was going to pump and all these things, right? So I did have my share of Tron, which I bought. And that is still, I don't know if that has still reached the point in time I bought it at, even today, all these years later. So that was kind of my first entry point into crypto, was the winter right thereafter, right? And then I came back around 2020 and 2021. Yeah.
In terms of identifying, the passion to work in the industry, what drove you there? I know you're in this current, configuration of your business, but what led to that? What was the things you tried, the things that worked, the things that didn't? And obviously we went to a lot of boom and bust cycles since you joined the industry, but what were the things that were kind of more floating around that captured your attention and you felt that was an opportunity to contribute or to make that a business for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I really did like DeFi. Once I stumbled upon that, I started to get more involved in projects, and so I started just actually getting involved because I'm also a full stack developer just as a hobby. And so there was one project that needed some technical help. The developer had let them down and scammed. Basically, they sent me the code and everything was in one file. So I knew right away that was no good. So right there, we had to fire them and get somebody else. And so I got into kind of what I want to say, this role where I was helping out. I was involved in the community. And to me, I was enjoying that more than I was my day-to-day job. I would find myself in the communities, paying attention there, having fun, kind of nerding out in both the marketing side, which I love, the branding side, which I love, the community side, which I love. I'm also I used to spend all my time in old like AOL chats and IRC chats back in the day, right? So I used to spend a lot of my time in text chats. So when I got into Telegram, it almost like transported me back in time in a point of nostalgia, right? So I got sucked in And I also I kind of like the Wild West nature of it, much like in the 90s when I was a teenager, when you had a little bit of the Wild West type mentality around it. I've always been kind of that person where, let me check this out, let me try and do this thing, although it may be risky and chaotic. That sounds like a lot of fun. Let's try it, and be in this. And that's what I've liked, is the excitement. I've always been one for, let's find what's next, right? And that's really what drew me in. And eventually I decided to start my own project. And then that thing, much to our surprise, we took at the time, and still today, memes are like the most popular things that people from all walks of life can understand, right? And so what we took was the most popular ones that were out there. We made them into Tamagotchi pets you could own. Okay. And we raised a little bit of money. We launched the MVP with everything live in the very beginning. It was a very low market cap. And within 3 weeks, this thing grew to over $200 million in market cap. We went from 0 to 75,000 token holders. We sold 50,000 of those pets. And literally in the community, I had grandma and grandpa, husband, wife, the kids, everyone in there. And I'm like, what the hell happened? Just a few weeks prior, my full-time job was working in like consulting as an operations consultant for a lot of brands. And here I am, like this pet guy, while also having a blast doing it on the microphone in the community, and really the energy it brought out in me. I'm like, what if I could do this all the time? And so that's really what brought me in. Is it was something that I found myself addicted to. I was passionate about. And then I made it something into my day-to-day life, where I was able to do that. We ended up actually selling that project, that company. And, coming out of that is really what I said, well, as I built all these pieces, both the highs and the lows, because I have been, managing a project when the bear market started. Now I feel I can help people along both pieces of this journey, right? It's not enough to just say this is what worked, but also what didn't work. And then how you kind of course correct for that. That's important. So that's why I really want to help other people, and why I felt compelled to work in this space is I just love it. And I felt I had a lot of, let's call it scar tissue, I could help share with others.
It's a good thing that also the space moves so fast. The tech evolves. There are all new protocols or new primitives coming out all the time. That there's not a shortage of things to learn and apply and test and try and see what works. I think obviously we may have taken things a bit too far with the NFT craze, maybe, just maybe, in terms of how that became over financialized so quickly. But then we had the meme coins, which was by and large a symptom of that era, right? It's so easy to issue a token, and everybody's so against the establishment that no one really cares that this is happening. To the point where a president, or many presidents, and now many politicians have found their way into the meme coin space. And then now on a subsequent stage, we're seeing the emergence of prediction markets, which is weird, because I recall that in 2016 there was one of the first applications running with Bitcoin was Augur, and it was a prediction market. And I don't know if it still runs, but it's something that when I saw Poly Market and Kalshi coming back and making this kind of, I'm like, oh, we're so old of an industry that we have now cycles that repeat themselves in use cases. And I was like, okay, I'm definitely old in this particular industry. But one of the things that I really appreciate that we discuss online, and I want to bring that to the pod as well, is we talk a lot about use cases. Every now and again, we're on comment sections discussing, whether it's a fair use of the technology and it makes sense, or it doesn't, or it's just some crazy implementation, and and obviously there's a load of overlap with AI agents and whatnot. So, in your experience through the years you've been working on the industry, can you tell me, like, what are your favorite use cases that either you've seen or worked on, and why are they? And what are some of the busts that you've been you witnessed, or you encountered, and you said, okay, this is not what the stack is for?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll give you a good one for this past year. Actually, just a few months ago, we finished it, and then now we can kind of talk about it. All right. So it's called State Chain. So basically, what it's about is you have these tax credits that go out to these different, let's say you're going to film in Tennessee State. You'll get some tax credits for doing that, right? Well, how do you know if that money, those tax credits, actually drive the real economic activity in the given area? Well, if you can use blockchain and also kind of program that these tax credits have to go through these vendor pipelines and have to be used a certain number of times. And you have taxes applied to that. You can take those taxes, and then now that kind of drains off those tax credits, but also filters them directly towards those areas that you really want to impact with economic activity, right? So that's the whole thought process behind that. I felt like that is a pretty cool, compelling use case. Another one we just finished, and this is one that will be coming out pretty soon, might be able to talk about it, is one where we're looking at payment finance. So if you look at Huma Finance, they're like enabling you to have this vault that can fund payments. And so what does that mean? Well, if you're somebody, for example, that serves ads, and let's say you're a mobile app publisher and you serve ads to BMW, they'll tell you, hey, we'll pay you, Mauricio, in 180 days. You'd be like, what the hell? I can't do that. I got people to pay. Well, all right, then I guess we'll find somebody else who will serve our ads and will take this payment structure, right? Oh, wait a minute here. Yeah, we'll do business with you. This is what's happening, right? And so now you have a gap where you've served value and you're not being paid. So if we have a way for liquidity providers to fulfill that settlement time in that gap and to have a fee structure where they can make money off of that, now you disconnect kind of the value you can make from the time period, which is usually like a year. Like if you look at Aave, you put your money in there and across a year you get your fees. In this case, the fees are a function of how many times you can turn that money over and capture the fee, right? So as I look at what you're able to do now across that, you can have an even higher yield while creating real business value. Now, in that case, that customer now they got their money faster. Here's the thing. They're also a customer within the platform. So now those people that didn't have money now have money they can spend with you. That increases revenues. That's expansion revenue. That's extremely important for your growth, right? So now if you look at your cost to acquire a customer and then your ability to drive lifetime value from them through getting them those payments faster and then monetizing those individuals, that to me is pretty smart business. Okay, that's an example of real money. All right, I'm not going to throw bullshit here. Okay, that's real money being made. All right, so now we can look at the opposite of this. All right, Monad is a case of the opposite, in my opinion. Right, so if I look at the big spike that's going to occur about a year after the launch, right? So whenever I see a big spike and what I'm talking about specifically is in the stacked area chart of the vesting schedule. So if you pull that up, you will note a big spike happens after a year. Well, what is that? Well, that means that the tokens are actually vesting right now for all those insiders. They're still vesting, but they can't claim them yet. So what happens is after the year, they all get them at once. And so now what happens here is nearly the supply is almost doubling on Monad. And if you look at the supply is doubling and increasing significantly by billions of tokens, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Now, if that's happening, and you look at if price is pumping still, now you get dumped on even more. So as you have a higher price, you have more tokens releasing that are worth more value, and you get destroyed, right? So that to me is ultimately what I call a ticking time bomb. Now, there's another interesting one called Barachain, which is going to have the exact same unlock, which will occur here in about 15 to 16 days. So I encourage everyone listening will be after that point in time from what you've told me. So it'd be interesting to go back and look at the chart and see what happens. Let's see if it's right? Let's see. All right, Tony recorded this. It is now January 14th of 2026. We will look at Barachain whenever this releases, and we will see what happened. We will see what happened. And if it survives this unlock, I will be amazed because who knows what kind of insider begging might have occurred in this case, because that's a big one.
Yeah, but it's funny you say this because the two use cases that you point as valuable or worthwhile, they are utilitarian. They serve a purpose, whether it's a functionality, whether it's a supply chain finance, which is precisely what the ads one is both are business practices that enable things to happen. The two other cases are pure crypto asset related. They are a function of the highly financialized speculative nature of decentralized protocols in today's world. So I think that the if I could kind of categorize these two things is that much like myself, what you appreciate is the applied use of the technology to resolve problems in the real world, and you kind of look sideways to things that are purely financial speculation. Even though speculation has its place in the world, what we're looking into is a schedule. It's a scheduled fiasco potentially because it's the nature of the speculation in the market at these things serve. So we will be checking in about a month's time when this comes out.
When it comes to like speculation, like in the example I gave in the first case, like that's a case where you can have a utility token that actually helps attract liquidity providers. In that case, that token can be used. In this example, you could use the stable coins in that vault to buy the token to distribute as payment if they want to receive some of the token to use in a system for a discount. Now you have an on-ramp payment mechanism through that, right? So there's ways that you can get liquidity into the token as well. And this is another key insight I want to put on here is whenever tokens are distributed, ideally you have some kind of liquidity backing those things, right? So if you just say, yeah, I'm going to pay you in this token. Well, if you didn't use any real value to do that, you just transfer. That's not a transfer of value because liquidity did not change, right? So whenever I look at everything, as I call it stability, I'm looking at liquidity and how it cycles through. So in that example, there would never be anything issued as a payment that would not have a real value backing that through the distribution, right? So if someone said, I want to get paid in the token, you would take that USDC from the vault, buy it off the DEX, transfer it right to them. That injects liquidity. They can spend it instantly in the platform for a discount. That's utility. Then now they take zero price exposure if they can use it right away, right? So, or they might hold it if they want to believe it'll go up, and then now they have more buying power if that's what they want to do, or if they want to cash out to pay their people, employees, whatever, they can use stables for that and they don't affect the selling pressure of the token, right? So when you think about how you can architect something, I think it really has to boil down to liquidity and how the business and how the system works. So that's why I wanted to expand on. A lot of people might see, I believe everything is speculative right now. I'm not going to say it isn't, but you have to make money and then tie what's making money to the speculation or else it will not be working. You know? Right? So
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be some sort of flywheel, otherwise it dries itself, right? It's just not something that is sustainable in any term, if that's not really creating, the value creation, value capture flywheel, which is ultimately what we would expect network effect to look like if if executed correctly. Now, in terms of the time frame that we've been in the industry, we saw a lot of things coming from outside the industry having quite a lot of influence. It's not just technology, it's not just decentralization, it's not just new standards or primitives. It's also the world around us changing in ways that either push or pull adoption of the technologies and the solutions that we're able to provide. Um, what do you think is the largest change you've seen in the period you've been in the industry, whether it's regulatory, whether it's a geopolitical? What are the things that you've seen that had the largest impact, whether negative or positive, the largest impact? And a little bit of kind of futurism is, what do these changes point as a trend going forward? Because we're all pro adoption of the technology and the solutions, but they don't exist in a vacuum. What these trends look like going forward?
yeah, I mean, the biggest ones I think is really last year when you had a lot of regulatory like really piping through, right? Because before that, like I know even when you're working with teams, you don't know if what you're about to do is legal or illegal, right? And that was a major problem, right? So whether if you're trying to build something, let's say you're a legitimate company, how do you actually convince your stakeholders and take on the legal liability risk of building in this space without the regulatory clarity, right? So when I look at what needs to happen to drive real adoption, and I can't grab it now, but there's a book on my shelf, right, called The Diffusion of Innovations by Everett Rogers. And then within this thing, what you can look at with that is like how the diffusion of innovation works. And what it talks about is once you have like the larger institutions that are like kind of coming in, that pulls through the rest of the technology. But if you don't have those institutions coming in, then I assume it will not be adopted. Like in the book, it has a great example of you have a Peruvian village where the villagers do not believe you should boil water or drink hot liquid unless you are sick. So they get sick all the time because they don't know any better, right? But no, despite what all the doctors and scientists are saying, they cannot convince the people of otherwise until the village elders convince people to now boil their water. And then now everyone does it and have a lot less illnesses, right? So this is a point of adoption. Really, in that case, the elders are the big institutions that create, like you're seeing with Stripe, and a lot of the adoption that pulls all this through. This is how I personally believe it works. Like even in my time when we had, like in your time when we had AOL was the primary way to get online at one point with dial-up. Then you had cable internet came in. Well, the cool thing was, at least here in the US, we already had cable in all of our homes. So the guy came out, gal, they installed the cable and you were off and you were done. They had the distribution. That to me is the adoption, and that really enabled the speeds that we saw too, right? That enabled so much throughput. Now you could do streaming videos and all kinds of things. Before that point, it would take you 3 minutes to download a song, an MP3 on 56K, right? It would be very slow, right? So as I think about the same thing here, it's this large adoption that will take place through the regulatory, of which we saw a lot last year, that will enable a lot, of more of the adoption, a lot more people using this stuff. Like, so now we will have a wallet which will feel comfortable holding assets. Cool. That might be the first step that person takes. Now they're comfortable holding a digital asset, right? And not seeing the NFT as a profile picture, but seeing it as a real digital asset that connects in legal to exactly what they hold. Like, this is my NFT for my collectible that's in a vault that's tied to my name. This is what I own, right? This is what I want to see, right? And that's how I see the future of it. Now, when I look at a good kind of document, if you wanted to check out the future, is something by Ribbit Capital. They did this token letter. It came out internally in June, and they published it for everybody, I think, maybe 2 months ago. And it talks about token factories. And what they talk about is pretty much everything will be tokens in the future. From the knowledge, different types of data, right? Everything will be tokenized. We hear about tokens all the time in AI, right? So what they have is something called token factories. And why do I believe that also to be true? Is, as I used to consult in manufacturing and I would look at supply chain, how do you know that that lumber that was harvested here in this area of the US that came from a sustainable forest was used all throughout the supply chain? Right now, that's all paperwork. People are processing audits, all this. Well, if that could be through a blockchain, that now you have that flowing through and it's validated, and this is where I see technologies like Hyperledger Fabric and things like this being more prevalent. Well, now you have a solution. You can do that, and that enables you to have like the trust without all the auditing, right? And now you can validate things a lot easier, right? Especially through the supply chain, you can validate things. So that's how I personally see like the solutions is, I hope we will see a lot more like real world value creation and companies doing that, because now they're not worried about the legal as much, right? I think we'll see a lot less speculative tokens and things like this, but I still think we will see still a lot of tokens, because I believe these platforms will grow revenues. They'll want to find a way to drive liquidity, want to find a way to tie their community together, want to find a way to get back to early users of platforms. And that's a great way to do it, right? And I don't think that all of them should have the dump fest and PvP of investors versus the community. I do not believe those early stages will always take shape. And that's why I'm also interested in like ownership coins and things like MetaDAO, where they're going more like the futarchy angle. And that's why I'm also looking at Avicii and projects that are kind of over there and paying attention to what happens. I'm kind of just watching things anxiously for now to see if, is this a better way to kind of ownership coin angle, right? And how you tie it into KPIs and the treasury management and all this. Is that the better way to do it? I don't know. We'll see.
We have to move from whatever the current state of DAOs are to kind of this DAO 2.0, where there's a little more metric, like an on-chain metric. But you touched on something that speaks to my past, and I felt a little bit nostalgic. Why would you bring up Hyperledger Fabric in this day and age? I mean, what are the things that you're seeing that are still leaning into permission chains such as Hyperledger Fabric? Because there is a litany of use cases that were Hyperledger based or Fabric based in my IBM days. I can tell for sure that over 90% of them have been turned off to a certain capacity. We saw even R3, the makers of Corda, bringing Solana as a strategic partner and trying to merge things into the permissionless world. So let's double click on that. What are you seeing that maybe I'm not, that still holds onto the legacy permission chains?
So I think probably what might be the best example of it is probably early use case and just kind of MVP. Easy to get something up and going, easy to start using it. As an example, in this case, this was cocoa processing. So what they had set up is they had bought like a couple cocoa processing plants. They needed a way to kind of tokenize what the farmers were dropping off, what was being processed, and have that flow through basically the whole system, right? So Hyperledger Fabric is probably the easiest way to kind of spin something like that up. I think it does depend on the use cases, right? So I'm not going to act like everything needs to be that. I'm also curious on how privacy comes into play, because I do not believe everyone will want all their business made public, especially the revenues. And, with the on-chain AI, like having your AI genius analyze your competitors' on-chain data could be a massive disadvantage or advantage for yourself. Like who's paying them? What are these projects, right? Like you could look at a wallet and know a lot about this. Now, what projects are paying? You can see the deployer wallet and tie all that back, right? So there's many ways you can use this stuff kind of, to disadvantages. So yeah, I mean, that's what I really think is it depends on the use cases. I'm not seeing as much in that, but I would say kind of if you're looking more enterprise, that's where I've heard it even more. Like in that case where they're not worried as much about more of a speculation thing. They're not worried as much about, let's say, building a community. They don't care about that. What they want is to be able to manage inventory and do it efficiently through the system, right? So beyond that, another case that I'm also aware of is I know there's like these layer threes that would even spin up in some cases too. I'm not sure if you've seen some of those in like Arbitrum and Optimism. I don't know why we need more layer threes, but that's another thing I've seen some people kind of doing, is laying another one on top of this. And that's one way I've seen it kind of done, where they control a lot more of the chain, right? And that might be, and then it has its own explorers you can integrate in very easily because it's all EVM. So those are the other type of solutions I think, I've kind of seen a little bit too. But I do not like those, because a lot of times those have been these node sales, if you're familiar with those. And sometimes those have been kind of chaotic, right? Where you have your own layer three with your own nodes. Well, none of those nodes are actually doing anything of value. So it's pure like emissions and just a bunch of selling pressure, so, so it's sort of like why some of those models haven't worked out as well. Those decentralized networks where it's its own thing, that's why those tend to fail, is all the nodes mine all the rewards and just PvP against each other. There's no value there.
Yeah, that's a race to the bottom usually, and obviously you're overcomplicating things, because it seems, it plays to the thing people call Dino, the decentralization in name only, right? Which is kind of, or decentralization theater, as some say, right? And that's obviously detrimental to the genuine upside of us going into blockchain, which is, the underpinning of all this is decentralization. Even though some people will say, well, nobody cares if things are decentralized, but I think decentralization is one of those things that it doesn't matter until it really does. Like when you get something taken away from you because it was a central point of failure, and you have no control whatsoever on your data, which is essentially all the use cases you described. I think the value was, more importantly, on the control over the data. That is when decentralization really comes into play. And if you're not, then there's no way around it, right? And absolutely, you can create business models that are centralized on top of decentralized infrastructure. We're seeing this with things such as stablecoins. There's a because the algorithmic stablecoins were probably too broad to start with, and we didn't test them well enough for an extended period of time, created havoc in the industry. Um, I think the response to that was an over centralization on the business models for issuing stablecoins, and we've seen this firsthand with Tether and Circle. There are other models like M0 that are trying to decentralize issuance. But the fact of the matter is that we don't have the ability to build decentralized business models over centralized infrastructure, and that's where I think these permission chains there'll always be niche, and I think you pointed that to the use cases you mentioned, and it's been now what, so we're 2017, so it's been now 10 years um, uh, that that has been Hyperledger Fabric's been issued in the end of 2016. That's when Hyperledger project, now the Linux decentralized trust, is was founded in partnership with IBM. I was there at the time, so this all is very nostalgic to me. That's why I'm kind of trying to kind of double click into all of this.
Well, think about like if somebody wants to pay a bunch of transaction fees, that probably would not be the best for their business, right? Unless it's like adding, and I think it always goes back to like when you mentioned decentralization, my background is in like quality is a big piece of this. Now quality is determined by the customer. So if you don't value decentralization, then selling it to you will do nothing, right? So as I think about it, like really the solution should be based on whatever that quality characteristic is, where you know what, you care if it's the most decentralized, as long as you have all this order tracking, you can audit things a lot easier as a business. You don't have to do all the paperwork. I mean, that stuff could be great, and I think it is all about, like, as I hope it will be, is actual value based on that kind of quality characteristic. I want to emphasize that kind of dictates what solution you should use, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's one of the things that, me being a broad person, you tend to obsess about the problem, not the solution, right? If you obsess about the solution, then you lose sight of what the problem really is, and then you're gonna have, for a hammer, every problem is a nail situation kind of thing, and look at the thing is the job to be done. That's what you're solving for, and I think, again, in a principled approach, you will offer a spectrum of options when it comes to centralization. Some people will want a layer three because it is under their control, and that's what serves for the use case. But more importantly is that if it's satisfying, solving for something that no other technology can, then I think that's job to be done. Uh, we're now in January. This should air early Feb. Um, let's do a little bit of annual planning, looking into how the markets are now organized. We have more regulation coming from major jurisdictions in the first quarter of the year. What would a great 2026 look like for you?
So for me, I'm very much focused on moving what I'm going to call into like helping real business get on chain, right? So that could be like mineral rights as one example. That could be in payment systems as an example. So that's personally what I would view as a success, is actually staying in the area of saying, hey, you know what? You've been building a traditional business. Maybe you're a successful entrepreneur. Now you're going to come here. I get it. There's a lot of scams. There's a lot of things that could go wrong. Let us help you and kind of guide you along the journey. That's at least what I hope we can do that for kind of more people. And that's kind of my vision for like Tokenomics.net, is now people can come in, feel they have the right guidance. I give them my whole network. Am not one that takes commissions. Says publicly, nobody's ever paid me a commission here. Anyone who hears this, it will not be able to comment otherwise, right? And so that to me is ultimately about lack. Now there's no bias, right? So as I look at it, that's where I really hope to impact is those real businesses that are building real things on chain. So now we have even more real use cases we could call back to. Like I mentioned, that state chain one, that's one that I'm pretty proud of. Hopefully the state adopts that, and then now that could be sold through, right? That could be pretty cool to track that, especially when we hear all these issues now politically in Minnesota and things like this that's happening here in the US with the scams and the fraud, right? Like, how come we can't track where the money's going? We can't. We have ways to do this, right? But we don't have the people onboarded into the infrastructure that know how to use it to do it yet. And that's a barrier, right? We can't act like, yeah, we can do it, but we still have the human element to consider at all points in time, of which we have people that are of varying walks of life and use technology comfortability, let's say, right, to implement. So as I see it, that's what I would hope for, is we get more people in, more people comfortable, so we can use more of the benefits. I think that's ultimately what we need, right? And hopefully I could do more of that.
As an industry now, more than just your microcosm there, like, what is the one thing that we must solve now to avoid working another decade on this and realizing we didn't solve that thing, and now we're back to square one? So what is that one thing, and why?
So what I would say is figuring out how we can enable both investment into what I'm going to call a company that has a token, and a token at the same time, without having the thing get destroyed, right? By having the investors compete alongside the community, right? Because when I think about whether this will work or not, this is the one thing that constantly hits in my mind, right? Is why do people always want the token? Because they don't believe the company will make any money. So they don't want the equity, right? So what I think, if we solve for that, then we have to first start off with a company that can make money so the equity could become valuable. That to me is one step. That would be how we would solve this first step. Then once we have the token kind of attached to this, now we have something that kind of has value. And that's how I personally would see it. Now, if that's the case, I would personally like to say, hey, if you're an investor, now you get tokens in alignment with maybe a revenue KPI or something that's tied directly to performance. So now you as an investor, you're tied in with the community into growth, right? And now you want liquidity outside of a future sale or future liquidity event when you sell the business. Now there's a way you can do that, but it revolves around growing the whole project or company in this case, right? And the reason why I would say that is I've heard a lot of times that, hey, after the launch, we don't care what happens to the project. That's what I've heard. I'm not going to say where I've heard this, but I've heard that quite a bit, right? So what does that mean? Well, after that's over, now you're just getting sold down. These are people selling in your community and you're there with your face, and now you have to answer for that. That I do not believe is a good situation for a founder to come into, right? So what I'm interested in, I don't have all the answers now, but what I think a lot about are how we can solve the issues of making sure, first of all, we don't have this kind of PvP relationship. It should be a mutually beneficial relationship, right? Instead, every launch is the insiders selling against the public, right? And these are the customers. So what business would sell on its customers and destroy everything in the very beginning if it was serious about building a business when it launched? It makes zero sense when you think about it. And that's the stuff that kind of bothers me. We're old enough to remember the dot-com days, remember how crazy that was. And that's when the sewage gets flushed down the system, right? It's kind of what happens. And so that's why I'm very interested in kind of that one area, because I think we have to solve for that if we want tokens to survive and really, I think, thrive. It can't be what's happening now, because it's not working, where all the insiders get wealthy and the community gets destroyed. It's not working.
There's a reason why this thing is outlawed in regulated markets. It's because it hurts the market. So it's obviously something that we need to, and I fully subscribe to that. And it's also one of the things that I've been mentoring startups since 2017. And one of the things I always tell the innovators is um, the innovation doesn't end when you launch it. It's your baby. Like you don't have a kid and then throw it out with the bathwater. You grow it. You bring it up, right? So it's the same with innovation. Once it's live in production, innovation is now legacy, and it has to be taken care of as legacy. And especially because in the blockchain space, most of what we built so far is infrastructure. Even some of the applications are somewhat of the plumbing. Infrastructure is serious business. It's supposed to be boring. It's supposed to be the thing that just works. And I think just to play back to the incumbents being responsible for adoption, incumbents don't come unless there is some stability that they can trust and rely on. And I think the coming of age for the technology is absolutely related to that boredom that we need to be as an industry, because obviously the meme coins are exciting, the communities are exciting, but everything we're touching is infrastructure. So might as well just treat it as it is. And I totally agree with you in terms of being serious about longevity in building technology for the next 20, 30, 40 years means that you don't get to walk away from your users in day zero. That's not why we're here. I love that take. In terms of and it's still an industry that doesn't stop 24/7, crazy headlines, side winds and all that. So how do you keep yourself healthy? Do you have a routine? Do you have what are your habits that over the years you've structured in a way that allows you to operate and not go insane?
That's a good question. Just like take yesterday, I started work at 6 o'clock in the morning. I stopped at 11 o'clock at night. Right now, I'm also one where I have almost unlimited energy. So what I would say, it's not to me as much of I don't know if I can give them any hacks. What I will say is, like, to me, I've always been like interested in my goals and just relentlessly going after these things. And so that's really what I would say keeps me going each and every day, is like, well, I'm excited to see where I can go. I have a lot of plans and ideas for myself. Sometimes I have too many, so I've got to juggle all these different things, right? But to me, it is a matter of, like, if you want to stay in this industry and have longevity, you have to think about where do you want to go and then accomplish that each and every day, right? So for me, my energy is really just seeing more progress. And yes, when I hit 1010, when all that dumped down, it does give you a little bit of a gut punch. But for me, I just look at it where it's now more motivation. All right, now what am I going to do differently? I can't affect that, right? So as I look at it, it's always just like a tenacity to go after it. And that's just how I've been kind of, I'm not going to say I was like that when I was in my early 20s, but after I had my first son, then it's almost like a switch was thrown inside of me. I am also a workaholic. I've been to therapy and stuff for this. I'm just going to say, so do not use me as your example. But that being said, this is something that in me is just a drive. Like my head nonstop thinks about ideas, nonstop thinks about strategy, nonstop thinks about this space, nonstop thinks about my offer, nonstop thinks about my customers, how I can help them. Like it's a nonstop obsession with it, and it's almost impossible to turn off. And that's why I can just do it endlessly and I do not get tired. Eventually, once in a while, I'll get a day where I'll burn out, but I'll be right back. And I've had some partners that have tried to keep up and it just does not work. I'll just say, I'm not trying to be braggy, but that's my energy and tenacity.
Do you demand that level of tenacity from the people you work with? What's your culture like?
That's a great question. So how I work as a leader is what I'm going to call, I prioritize for what's called ease of work. Okay. So I want people around me that are intelligent. Like I'll give you a great example. I hired my first employee. How we got hired was I actually hired him to help me build my tokenomics template and make it automated, right? Do all the formulas, work with me on that. And I gave him a good test project, right? How would I test them out? I said, hey, here, I want your help building the template for me. And he goes, all right, what do you want on that? I said, what are you asking me for? You're the guy building the template, just to test and see what would happen, right? He didn't say anything, went back and he made the template. He came back, it was great, right? I give a few pointers, templates, tips, things like this, right? So when I think about how to find the right person first, is you want to find people you can do that with. Because if you got to tell everybody every little tiny thing, that's going to be a parasite when you're trying to grow, right? And that individual now feels empowered to make their decisions. They feel ownership over the work. Okay, so my culture is not one where I'm micromanaging. I expect that you will do your job. And also, if you do a great job, I will pay you even more. And I'll always be there day and night. If you have a question or any problem, I'll pop on. Like a few weeks ago, team member said, hey, this isn't working for me, whatever. Instantly get on the call, solve it, upgraded his membership. Now he has his software. Now he's off and running, right? No, oh yeah, I'll get to that. No, oh yeah, I'll let that sit, right? And then also that same person, when he started, I challenged him to learn kind of AI and also programming. He never had done that before. I said, well, that's a great opportunity now to challenge yourself to see how you can learn, right? So within the company, I'm also not only doing that, but I'm giving a ton of mentorship. I probably spend 2 or 3 hours a day doing mentorship internally, right, for that individual. That way, as time goes on, within my company, they're doing a better job for my clients. They're more reliable. They feel like they have the support. They feel like they can grow. They know where my head's at. They know where we're going. They know exactly what their job is. So when that person started, literally right now, I could pull up all the core values of my company, all my funnels, exactly what I'm doing, who my customers are, my avatars, all of that is there. It's all there in writing with numbers right now. Right. So if you're working with me, you're like, wow, this person has their shit together. Right. So what I would say is if you want people to want to work with you and you want to win, you got to set them up to win. And that's how I work. So anyone who works with me feels everything they need to do their jobs and then some is there. And I'm going to love them every step of the way if they do a good job. Now, if they do a bad job, I'm going to tell you right now, I'll give you the chance to improve, but I will be very quick to fire. I'll be very quick to remove because I will not work with and lower my standards. I will expect high standards, right? But I will respect the person in that they're not one who can go nonstop as well. And they're still a human being and not a robot. They still have a family to provide for. They still have their own dreams and goals. And my job as a leader is to make sure that whatever I build, they have room for them in all the things that they want within this, right? And that's how I kind of think about it. And if I have done that well, like my mentors did for me, I'll have someone who's loyal as I was for my mentors. Just this past weekend, I went and saw one of my old mentors and we spent, some time together, right? So it's like, I still have these relationships of people who did that with me. And so that's how I build it within the company. Very much this approach. It's kind of a lean Six Sigma, like training, guidance there for people, Socratic method, challenging people, all this kind of mixed into, what I hope is a good mentorship, hopefully not a bunch of noise.
Do you have people in your life that are not crypto still?
Yeah.
And do you onboard them into the industry? How do you approach that? When people call you like, oh, there's a Bitcoin all-time high, now I want in. How do you bring them in? What's your process there?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what I really just say is, hey, you don't want to be buying Ethereum and all these Solana and all this. I said, if you really want to get in, just take whatever you're comfortable each week and just buy a little bit of Bitcoin and that's it. Every week, just do that. And then you do that over long term, look at the chart. It always goes up and makes a new high. You'll probably be good. But if you go into these dog coins and all this, trust me, you'll be in anxiety. I've been the guy literally making 40 grand in a day off a dog coin. Okay, that was me before. All right, now I'm not going to be that. You got to sit there, stare at the charts. You got to get rugged, right? So what I would say is a new person coming in, do not try and be intelligent. Instead, try and be simple. And if you want to buy something, not financial advice, Bitcoin is probably the best one. Underneath that, you could buy yourself some Ethereum, some Solana, and probably just take it from there and probably be all right. If you do those three, and kind of mix it, let's say 50% Bitcoin and 25 and 25, probably a good distribution. And you do that over time, usually you're going to be pretty good shape, from what the charts kind of play out as, right?
And in terms of people getting in touch with you, learning more about what you do, following you on socials, and if they have a project you want to, what's the path to get your attention and them potentially working together?
It's just tokenomics.net. They could book a free call there or through my LinkedIn profile. So Tony Drummond, I produce content almost every single day on a variety of LinkedIn topics, and usually for founders. So today was about personal branding. I just threw that out there. If questions people have on personal branding, just give some tips and some advice on things that work, right? Because I believe founder-led branding is going to be important, right? So I just try and do that kind of stuff. So if you're a founder and you like learning about marketing and branding and tokenomics as well, and we're not all about that, feel free to join in.
Awesome. Tony, it was such a pleasure. Love the energy. Love the story. Thanks for joining me for this. And hopefully we'll meet in person at some point in a crazy crypto event around the world.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Catch us online. We're on Instagram at BlockDropsPodcast, on Twitter at BlockDropsPod or Xerox Mauricio. We're on Lens at blockdrops.lens. We have a newsletter on LinkedIn. Write to us at blockdropspodcast@gmail.com. And you can listen to the BlockDrops podcast at Spotify, iColab, Faberbun Tech, and all of the other major streaming platforms. Yay! Shout out to Tony for bringing such great energy amidst a sea of red sharks. Don't forget to leave the ratings on your favorite player and check out the merch store at blockdropspodcast.xyz. This is all for today. Stay rare, stay weird. LFG.